Helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
Hi, Bob. How are you doing today?
How was the trip up?
Oh, it was long. It was long. Today we have with us Deborah Rainey, and she has been writing for quite some time, over the last 30 years, and almost 40 novels. So Deborah Rainey's first novel was A Vow to Cherish, which inspired the Worldwide Pictures film of the same title and launched Deb's writing career. 25 years, 40 plus books, and numerous awards later, she's creating stories that touch hearts and lives. A 3-time Christie Award finalist and winner of the Rita Award, Carol Award, National Reader's Choice Award, and Holt Medallion. Deb is represented by Steve Laub of the Steve Laub Agency. She served on the executive board of the 250,000 member American 2,500. Right, I'm sorry, wrong number. 2,500 member American Christian fiction writers for 18 years and teaches at writers' conferences around the country. Deb is a Missouri transplant, having moved with her husband, Ken Rainey, from their native Kansas. They love road trips, Friday garage sales, time with their family, and breakfast on the screen porch overlooking their wooded backyard, which sounds absolutely delightful. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be visiting with you.
So, you've been publishing for quite some time, and you have over 40 novels. How do you continue to find fresh ideas?
Well, I think the most important thing I do is try to keep trying new and different things in real life. And my husband is the one who kind of pushes me, and I would be happy to just stay home and write all the time. But a few years ago, he got a crazy bug to buy an RV, and we have been traveling across the country, and that is where ideas are found. Is, when you start traveling and meeting new people and learning about new occupations, it is just great fodder for new ideas for novels, for characters, for settings, the whole enchilada.
Wow. And so now, how many of the states have you visited?
We are close to 50. We have not been in Alaska, but we did get to add Hawaii to our list not long ago. And we have at least driven through most of the other states.
Wow.
Well, you didn't drive to Hawaii.
Well, that's what I was thinking. How did you drive to Hawaii?
We flew to Hawaii.
All right. Now, how has the publishing world changed since, you've been doing it for such a long time, so I'm assuming, you went from a typewriter to maybe a computer to, I'm not sure. Tell us about that.
I did. I started out on a typewriter, and I started writing when you literally printed out your entire manuscript and sent it off to a publishing house and waited weeks and weeks for it to get there and weeks and weeks for it to get back.
Right.
I started writing actually in a time before you had to have an agent to get published. There were still a lot of publishers, especially in the Christian market where I write, who would accept your manuscript right over the transom and possibly publish it. But things changed very quickly. I started writing on New Year's Day in 1994, actually.
Wow.
And it wasn't long after that before the internet took the world by storm. And I went from talking on the phone with my editors, that is how we did everything, either through letters or the phone, to everything being done by email. And so I've had the same email address for 26 years. And so that is how things are communicated now. But there have been a ton of changes, not the least of which was all the Christian imprints that I wrote for being bought up by the big New York publishing houses.
Right.
And that meant that my contracts went from being 4 pages long and I could actually understand what they were saying
Yes.
to the contract being 25 pages long and just legalese that I absolutely needed a literary agent to help me interpret them.
Right.
So-
Absolutely. Now, when your books went from the smaller Christian groups to the larger companies, how did you deal with the
Mhm.
copyright and things like that? I mean, who owns those?
Well, the author always owns the copyright, and if you find any agent or editor who wants it to be otherwise, run in the other direction.
Right.
Because if you are traditionally published, your copyright will be in your name with the publishing house. Now, the publishing house is purchasing the rights to that book for a very long time. Most of the contracts that I signed in the early days said something to the effect of, we own this in any form, even those that have not been invented yet. So that
Oh my.
ebooks
Yeah.
came around, they automatically owned the rights to the ebooks. And today, it has become really important to me to be sure that any contract I sign has a good reversion clause. Because
Right.
you don't want your publisher hanging on to your book forever. You eventually, once the book quits selling with your publishing house, you want to be able to get the rights back to it and do something new with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the questions that you sent in, and I thought was a pretty interesting one, is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And how does that affect your writing process? I thought that was an interesting question you gave us.
But, you know, it's funny because when I first started attending writers' conferences, I learned that I am in an industry with a ton of introverts. And I'm a tremendous extrovert. And so it is very different to write as an extrovert. And honestly, if it were not for the wonderful writers groups and writers organizations that I have been a part of, I'm not sure I would still be writing, because I like my people too much and I need to be around people, and too much holing up in my office is just not good for me. It's not, I don't think I could thrive too long. So.
I agree with you on that. I couldn't do it either. I have an office and I find that I'm always roaming the house trying to figure out what I want to do next.
Me too. I tend to write different places. I will write out on the screen porch or on the sofa in the living room or in my office sometimes, but I love having different points of view. And when we travel in our RV, I'm usually working. I'm usually in the middle of writing a book, and that's great inspiration too.
Oh, I would think so.
Do you have a certain schedule to your writing? In other words, is it always in the morning, or is it in the afternoon, or?
Like Hemingway, he wrote every morning before he went out fishing.
He was a smart man. And I wish that I did have more of a schedule. I don't. When I first started writing, we had 4 kids, and once they were all in school, I kept a very tight schedule. Once my husband and the kids were out the door to work and school, I sat down, I wrote, for 7 hours or however long it was before they returned home, and then I closed my laptop, and I was done for the day. And now that it's just my husband and I in an empty nest, I tend to keep a terrible schedule, and I for some reason, I have gone from being a write in the morning kind of person to afternoon seems to be my best time to write. But I have more of a word goal. I write until I have 1,000 words. And sometimes I can accomplish that in 2 hours in the morning, and sometimes it takes me all day to eke out those words. So, but that's at least I have a goal and something that is keeping me with forward momentum. So,
can you talk about maybe your creative process and when it comes to developing characters or settings, anything in particular that you use or?
Well, I am a seat of the pants writer, or as my friend Alton Gansky says, an intuitive writer, which sounds a lot more, a lot more
Sophisticated and
professional, I
intelligent.
guess.
Yes, I hear you.
Exactly. But for a long time, I tried to outline my novels. I heard my friends saying, "Oh, you must outline. You must know your story before you even start writing it." And for me, that just sapped all the fun out of it. I always say that my writing process, I write kind of the way you dream. You just kind of follow a character and see where they're going to go. And I know that sounds a little woo-woo to anyone who's not a writer, but it really does. It keeps you guessing, and so hopefully that means that it keeps your readers guessing when they are reading your books.
So you don't write the end first, huh?
No, I don't. I usually have a pretty good idea of what the ending will be, but everything in the middle is a mystery to me when I start writing. And another thing that I find is that my character will start out being one sort of person, but as she goes through the, whatever crucible I am putting her through, she changes and grows, which is a good thing. But I also tend to find that usually about 2/3 of the way through the book, I realize that she is not at all the person that I wrote her as in the early chapters. And so I usually need to go back to those early chapters and fix my characters, my main characters, to be more like the people that they have become, so that she doesn't seem like a completely different person at the end.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of my ideas for scenes and for the direction the plot will go happen as I'm getting to know my character and as I'm plugging my characters into this setting. And the setting, I find, has become very important to me because that really helps shape who my character is and who she becomes. And so I love novels where the setting is almost like a character in itself, and that you could not take that story and move it to another setting and have it work in the same way.
Oh, well, that's an interesting thought. I also talked at the very beginning about your book, A Vow to Cherish, that was turned into a movie of the same title, starring Ken Howard and Barbara Babcock and David Denham and Ossie Davis. Well, what was that experience like?
It was an amazing experience, mostly because it all happened with my very first novel. And I often say that I'm not sure that I would still be writing today if that thing had not happened, simply because it kind of put my novel in the limelight and got the attention of some publishing houses. And once that happened, it was pretty easy for me to get a contract at that point. And so that little bit of great success right in the beginning. Now, it also means that there's nowhere to go but down after that.
Right.
I have had that experience as well, because I have had a couple of books optioned for film, but another movie has not happened yet. And but it really was a wonderful experience. I had nothing to do with writing the screenplay. And I knew that when I signed the contract, signing, away the rights for this film company to do my story as a movie, I knew that they would make a lot of changes, because I've watched enough movies to know that they're never like the book,
So how'd you feel about all those changes?
Well, honestly, I could understand why they made the changes they did, and it made a lot of sense. For example, in my novel, my characters, it was a couple, and they had 3 children. Well, in the movie, they only had 2. And, of course, the budget is part of the reason for that, but also time, because a screenplay is only about 100 or 120 pages, and a novel is, can be 3 times that long. So there just simply isn't enough time to develop a lot of characters. And so something is going to get cut. And then also the producer and the actors and everybody always wants to put their own stamp on the story. And, that's understandable. So I was very happy. I mean, they definitely stayed true to the the theme and the message and the mood of the story that I wrote, and I was very happy with the way that it turned out. So.
Were you on site at all whenever they were filming?
No, I wish I could have. That would have been a fantastic experience. I wasn't on site, but my husband and I did get to go to Hollywood and to the movie premiere and meet most of the actors in the movie. And so that was at the time I was a little Kansas farm girl, and that was a pretty heady experience.
Wow.
And, so, yeah, it was a very great privilege.
What were some of the challenges about dealing with that movie? I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious about things that you experienced, or things that upset you, or things that maybe gave you joy. What kind of challenges or?
If there was anything, I upset is a strong word, but I guess I questioned. They changed the name of my main character. They changed his first name. It was Jake in the novel, and they changed it to John. And it just so happened that the producer's name was John, and the producer's father's name was John. And so we speculated that maybe he just changed the name to honor his dad. We to this day don't really know why that happened. And so always when you're seeing someone else take your work and change it, I won't say that it upset me. It just made me curious. It made me wonder why.
Right.
But like I said, I did understand some of the reasons, and it changed the way I wrote from that point on. And for that reason, I am very happy it happened with my first novel.
How did it change the way you write? How did that happen?
Well, because I was not writing cinematically. I was, even though I saw the story in my mind playing like a movie, that didn't all translate to the page. And after seeing the movie, I realized that I needed to paint those pictures for the reader. Now, obviously, you don't want paragraph after paragraph of description, but with a few short words, you can set the stage so that your reader knows what to picture, and you help them to see, your story playing as a movie. But you need to learn to write very vivid scenes and images in just a few short words, because most readers today don't have the patience to read a lot of description.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hear you. And in a minute, I want to get to that, the publishing traditionally and independent thought, but you are listening to Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Mondays at 3 p.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM and AM, and Monday to Friday 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network. So you talked a little bit about being, the traditional or independent publishing. Now, A Vow to Cherish was a traditionally published book, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So now, are you doing traditional, or how are you handling that?
Well, I'm what they call a hybrid author now. I'm doing a little bit of both. I have some books that are traditionally published, but I'm also dipping my toes in the waters of independent publishing. And one of the reasons that writers do that is because when I finish a manuscript and send it off to my editors, it is usually several months before I hear back from them and have an editorial letter that I can do my rewrite from. And so I found myself just twiddling my thumbs for sure what to do next. And I'm really not a fast writer. I'm actually a fairly slow writer. It takes me I like to have 9 months to write a book. I've written them quicker, but I really like to have longer than that. And so a lot of writers, especially those who write a lot faster, they will publish traditionally, but while they're waiting on their edits and waiting on the cover design and all the things that you wait on with a traditional publisher, they are writing another novel that they will publish themselves independently. And I also have written for more than one traditional publisher at the same time. And you have to be very careful about dovetailing your contract and your release dates, because you don't want books from two different publishers releasing at the same time, because readers only have so much money and they probably will choose one or the other books and not buy both of them. So I try to have my publishers like to have at least 6 months between releases.
At least 6 months. Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes that you gave us, Bob, why don't you read it for us?
She slept under the stars that night, under the watchful eyes of Tomas and 2 other soldiers. The jungle's tumultuous night music rose and fell in cadence with the breeze, and though she was bone weary and the ground damp and cold against her back, Natalie relished looking up at the night sky, sans the barrier of a dirty skylight. After so many nights locked in the shed, it was a wonder to peer through the cave-like openings in the trees above her, all the way to the stars. She could almost imagine she was free. And that was from The Breath of Heaven by Deborah. What was your feelings about that quote?
Well, I love the way you read it. You should do audiobooks if you haven't already.
Well, we did talk about that for a while, did we not?
Yes, with our previous guest.
Yes, we talked about audiobooks. Do you do any audiobooks?
Yes, almost all of my novels have been done as audiobooks. Usually, if you're with a traditional publisher, they will do the audiobooks. But with my independently published books, we have hired a narrator to read the books, a wonderful reader by the name of Julie Lancelot. And she has done my 2 independently published books that through our own press, Rainy Day Press. But then also, once a novel goes out of print or just sales really slow down, that usually happens 8 to 10 years at the most after a book comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, an author might get the rights back to her books. And that's what happened with me. And that's where we first, did dip our toes into the independent waters. And what happened, it happens that I am married to a wonderful artist, and Ken, once you get the rights back to your book, you are free then to republish them, but you don't get the rights back to your cover art. And so all of my books that I was getting rights back to needed new book covers. And enter my husband, Ken, and he designed beautiful covers for my books, and we put them out through our Rainy Day Press. And then, they have a whole new life at that point.
Right.
And my novel, About a Cherish, when I got the rights back to it, I had agented myself for the first 9 years that I was writing. But when all of the big New York, Big Five, now Big Four, I guess, publishers started buying up the Christian imprints, and my contracts got very difficult to decipher, I knew that it was time for me to find a literary agent to do the negotiating and the contract work and all of that. And so one of the first things my agent did was to resell About a Cherish to a different publisher. And I remember saying to him, well, why would anybody buy this book a second time? Because it quit selling for the first publisher. And he reminded me that book first came out in 1996. And when 2006 came around and we resold that book, he said anybody who was 15 back when the book first came out is now 25. And,
right.
Everybody has aged, and there's a whole new flock of readers coming up.
Right.
And that's why a book can resell.
And so it was important to do that cover change too.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's right.
So do you recommend an author, an aspiring author, to get representation with a literary agent before submitting work? I mean, is that a recommendation you give?
It definitely is, especially if they aspire to write for a traditional publisher, because you just almost cannot get in the door if you don't have representation. Most of the big publishing houses will only look at a manuscript if it comes through a trusted literary agent.
Right.
But I'm always hesitant to say that because it needs to come with a warning, and that is, if you meet an agent who wants 1 penny from you before he has sold a book and gotten a contract, run away. Because the way literary agents work, the good ones and the legit ones, is that they make money only when you make money. So when my agent sells a book for me, he does not get 1 penny until I get my royalty advance, and then he gets 15% of that. And that is the industry standard, is 15%.
Oh, okay.
So,
What's the process that you use with working with your editorial staff at at the publishing? What's your process for that?
well, that's another thing that has changed quite a bit over the years. The way it used to work is that you would begin working with an editor. Your book would be bought by an acquisitions editor, and her job was just to discover new talent and find the best books, and then she would assign them to a substantive editor, or a developmental editor, some publishers call it. And so a book, back in the old days, a book would go through 4 different levels of editing. The first one would be developmental, where you're working with big picture issues. The plot, does it work? The characters, are they likable? All of those questions. And then next it would go through a line edit, which is just what it sounds like, line by line. Then it would go to a copy editor who would do all the P's and Q's and the punctuation and grammar and all of that kind of details. And then the last edit would be, they usually would have 4 or 5 different proofreaders have eyes on the book. Well, in recent years,
okay, we are going to have to go to a radio break, commercial break. So when we come back, let's continue that question because it's very interesting. Thank you for listening to KXOK, and we'll be right back.
Do you want to become a radio show host, or do you want to create a radio show? Well, Dr. Stan Fine can help you to have your own radio show and put you on 100 cities daily across the U.S. And you can immediately start recording from a live radio studio. As a radio industry veteran, Dr. Stan Fine has 12 years of experience and has produced and hosted over 1,000 radio shows with over 10 million listeners. Dr. Stan Fine knows how to make this happen for you. He's a pro, and he can turn your dreams into a reality. Dr. Stan Fine will help you with everything from learning how to promote your show, develop a host persona, interview techniques, market your show on social media, teach you how to get guests and sponsors, and more. Dr. Stan Fine can put you on the air nationwide daily to 100 cities. If you're interested in making your dream come true, if you want to see how it all works, then give Dr. Stan Fine a call at 314-710-8413. That's 314-710-8413. You've got nothing to lose, and Dr. Stan Fine can help make your nationwide radio dreams come true.
Hey, listeners, saying thanks to your customers is nice and polite, but expressing your gratitude in memorable and ongoing ways can boost your business. At Promo Experts LLC, we exceed our customers' expectations. For over 20 years, our product knowledge and experience has helped them with their marketing initiatives and trade show graphics. We are happy to put that experience to work for you. Quality products, great customer service, and prices are our #1 priority. We work with you to find unique, creative, and new ideas that fit your image and expectations, helping you build strong relationships with your customers. When you select Promo Experts as your marketing partner, we help you to see more than the big picture. For more information about this exciting opportunity, contact Diane Carson, President, at 636-458-5241. That's 636-458-5241. Let Promo Experts help you to move your business brand beyond the bland.
Okay, you are listening to the Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Mondays at 3 p.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM AM, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network. And Deborah, we were talking about working with your editorial staff at the publishing house, and you were giving us some idea, the things that the process that they would put you through for that.
Sure. Well, I had talked about the 4 different levels of editing, and nowadays, because of a shortage of editorial staff and other reasons, trying to get books quicker to market and that type of thing, a lot of publishers, most publishers, I would say, have combined the line edit and the copy edit, or sometimes the developmental edit and the line edit. And so it is a little bit shorter of a process. And as a result, unfortunately, I notice a lot more typos in books these days.
Yeah, I have noticed that too, come to think of it. Yes, absolutely.
That real care for, and including my own, and, that real care for proofreading over and over again. And it just doesn't matter how many sets of eyes are on a book. There's just always going to be one little typo that gets through.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You always hope for. And,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the wonderful things about ebooks and about Publish on Demand is that now if a reader tells you about a mistake, you can go in and fix it. And it will self-correct on everybody's Kindles, and the next printing that comes out will have that correction made in it, and so that's something that makes me very happy because I don't like typos.
Yeah, no, neither do I.
I also work as an editor, and so I'm picky about that.
So do you publish Kindle too on all your books?
Yes, all of my books are available as ebooks, as print books. A lot of them have been done in large print versions. Almost all of them, we're working toward this anyway, have been done as audiobooks. And then I have a lot of books that have also been translated into other languages. So I have books that I've written that I can't even read.
How many different languages do you know?
Well, I most of my books have been published in the Dutch language. For some reason, the Netherlands love my books.
Oh,
and
wow.
I have a few that have been done in German. And A Vow to Cherish was published in several languages, Danish and Swedish and Norwegian.
Any French?
I don't think that I have any French. You are French, aren't you, Gaia?
Yes, that's what I was asking.
Yes, no, but I had 3 years of French in high school. I speak very poorly, but I can usually pick up the French in a movie. I can understand what they're saying.
So can I. How much input do you have in the design of your book cover? You were talking about earlier where you had to remake the covers for when you were doing it a different publisher. But when you're going to a traditional publisher, how much input do you have in that?
It all depends on the publisher. Some publishers are wonderful and allow you a ton of input, and they will send you 4 or 5 different covers to choose from, and then they will work with whichever one you choose to get it just right. There are some publishers that are that way, and there are others that design a cover and show it to you, and that's that. And you, even if I have had several times where the character on the cover had long dark hair and my character had short blonde hair. And the good thing about that is that usually the cover, you get to see the cover before you are finished with the manuscript. And I have been known to go through my manuscript and change my character's description to match whatever woman was put on the cover. Because I do not like when covers don't match the story inside. That's really important.
That doesn't work for me either. Absolutely. Yeah. So which one of your books has been most successful?
I would
so
say
far?
Beneath a Southern Sky. Beneath a Southern Sky is the first novel in the Camfield Legacy series, and Bob read the excerpt from the final book in that series. And it's the one that it won the Rita Award and the Carol Award. It's won several awards, and just seems to be the one that kind of captured readers' hearts. And it's one of my favorites too. If I wouldn't used to name a favorite when I only had 5 or 6 books, but now that I have 40, some have risen to the top in my own mind. And probably if I was going to recommend one book for people who haven't read my books, it would be my novel, A Nest of Sparrows.
A Nest of Sparrows?
A Nest of Sparrows. Mm-hmm.
And why that one?
It's partly because I worked so hard to write that book, and the research about killed me. And also, I think one reason I like it is because it was the first book that Publishers Weekly reviewed favorably. They were pretty hard on my books in the early years, but they liked that one, and that was a good thing. So, and that is one that I had a movie option on at one time too, and it nothing ever happened with it. They didn't renew the option, so that's probably off the table for now. But I don't know. There's something about that story that I just really like. It has a special place in my heart.
Is there any way, or I guess the question is, how do you get to movie producers or people who are producing movies, and how do you reach them?
Sometimes literary agents have connections. And so that is sometimes a way that a producer will find out about your book. With my first novel, I asked my publisher for permission. They didn't shop their books around for film. In fact, when I came to them, they had never had a movie made of one of their books. Mine was the first. And since then, they've had quite a few. But I asked permission to shop that book around, and I sent the manuscript to Hallmark Hall of Fame and a bunch of different places that I knew, and it turned out to be that Worldwide Pictures was one of them, and they ended up liking that story and turned it into a movie. But probably the way most book-to-movie events happen is that the book becomes popular with readers. And think about Where the Crawdads Sing. That
Right.
book just took the world by storm. And so naturally, it was going to be made into a movie. So I always say, if you want your book to be made into a movie, there's several things you can do. The first thing is just to write a fantastic book. Write a book that gets people talking, that is unusual and unique and not run of the mill, and that keeps people guessing till the very end how it's going to turn out, and make it have if not a happy ending, at least a hopeful ending, because that's what people want, especially in this world that we are currently in. There's such a need for hope and for happiness and joy.
Like Scarlett said, tomorrow is another day.
That's right. Yes, that's
Did
right.
Scarlett say that?
Scarlett said
wow.
that.
In a book.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were there?
No, I wasn't there.
What are you working
But I
on
saw
right
you
now?
there.
Oh, yeah. I probably was there. What are you working on right now?
Well, I am just getting ready to. I have a Christmas novella in the collection, and that has, up until just after Christmas, that has been the focus, is promoting that book. But I am just getting ready to start a new series, and it's going to be a series probably of 3 books, but possibly more, and they are pretty much standalones that are loosely connected by the fact that the main characters in each novel will be proprietors of Airbnbs. And that's an idea that has been inspired. My husband and I took a trip along the coast of California and stayed in Airbnbs along the way, and we just had so many great experiences, and it just was so fun to meet new people at every stop of the night, and get to know some people, feel like you've made new friends, and just see how different it is for each one of these proprietors and how many stories they have to tell. And so I wanted to try to capture some of that magic in a series of novels.
Yeah, it is interesting about the stories. I used to go down to St. Mary's, Georgia, just outside of Jacksonville, and stay at a B&B, and it's just a fun place. So you can meet so many people.
Yes, always an interesting story happening there.
What kind of techniques do you use to ensure that your writing is engaging and accurate? I mean, or do you edit as you go along, or?
I do. I start every day by editing what I wrote the day before. And so that means that when I get to the end of that first draft, it's really more like a third draft. And it's a pretty clean manuscript. And for me, I have to have a fairly clean manuscript before I can go through and really start to see the bones of the story and make sure that it's hanging like it needs to, you know. And again, my what I call writing cinematically is very important to me. I look at the beginning of every scene, and especially scenes where I'm introducing a new character, and I make sure that the first paragraph of that scene sets the stage and gives the reader something to envision so that they can clearly see it. And I might spend a half an hour writing that first paragraph, but once I have set the stage, then I can just play with dialogue. And because the reader already has a scene to, or a stage to see where everything's taking place, then the dialogue can tell the rest of the story. And readers tend to really like pages with dialogue. That's where I think characterization really happens, when you get to hear your characters talk, not just be told what they are saying or, follow them around and see what they're doing, but hear them talk and hear them interact with each other and with the world.
Yeah, dialogue always pushes a novel forward, and that's part of why readers like it. It pushes the story, and it gets them, to what's happening next. If you hadn't become an author, what career would you have done? What would you have done instead?
I probably would have become a psychologist.
Oh,
and I know that real clients would not be nearly as cooperative as my characters are. But I love analyzing my characters and helping them solve the problems that I have put them into. And I don't know. I think I had a very, very happy childhood and very wise parents, and I just feel like that I guess maybe this is conceited to say, but then I have a lot of wisdom that I would like to share with people, and especially young people, if I could, knock some sense into some heads before people make the mistakes that they make in their lives. And that's what I always want to tell my characters, that if you just wouldn't have done this, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in now. So.
Absolutely. What authors would you say have the most influence on your writing?
Well, early on, it was definitely writers like Eugenia Price and Catherine Marshall, even Jeanette Oke. I just loved those stories. And it's interesting that those authors wrote mostly historical, and I do not write historical because I'm not so fond of research. And even when you write contemporary stories, you still have lots of research to do. But I would rather play with words than spend my time, hunting down dates and facts and how things worked in the world 100 years ago. So, but for some reason, those authors just really, really captured my heart and made me love to read. And since then, I do read more contemporary books than.
What are you reading now?
Right now, I'm reading a wonderful novel by a fairly new author. Her name is Katie Powner, and I have loved everything I have read by her. And this one is called something about blue skies. I'm terrible with titles. Let me go look on my nightstand and make sure I get the title right. Just people, Where the Blue Sky Begins is what it's called.
Where the Blue
And
Sky
her stories
Begins.
They're set in Montana, where she lives, and she has a wonderful way with words and a very unique way of writing, and creates just characters that are so real they just jump off the page.
You're listening to The Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Mondays at 3 p.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM and AM. Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on the MyJohner radio station network. And you can also see our website, which is authors-edge.com.
All right. So, have you ever co-authored a book?
In the sense that I have written one of the novellas that was part of a collection published as one book, one print book, I have. And then my sister, Vicki Miller, and I have written 2 different books of children's sermons. We both presented the children's sermons in our churches, and we had written almost all of our ideas down, and we just decided one day we should put these together in a book because we were always looking for ideas and thought we could help out other people who do children's sermons. And so this was back in the 90s. We had those 2 books published, and her son and daughter actually illustrated one of the books. Every chapter had a little illustration that her kids did. So,
That's lovely.
Still in print and still selling fairly well. So
that's
been
delightful.
Fun process. Yeah. And my only nonfiction books also. So.
All right. Bob, you said you wanted to say something.
No?
No? You don't want to say anything?
Actually, what I wanted to know was how much input do you, as an author, have on the design of your book covers, or and I guess you've really discussed that because you've talked about the way some publishers handle that. And
yeah. Well, now that my husband is doing my covers, I have a whole lot more input, and that's a lot of fun. Now, he sometimes just humors me, and I do have to remind myself that he's the one trained in design, and he's the artist, and so I do trust him to come up with really good ideas. But he's pretty good about letting me have some input on those too. And I must say that the covers that he has done for my books are truly some of my favorites of all the covers I've ever had designed. So that's always just one of the most fun moments in the life of any book is when I first get to lay eyes on the cover of the book.
Does that inspire you to change parts of the story?
Sometimes it does. It really does. And it also sometimes it will change the mood of the book. If the cover has a certain mood to it, and in fact, with my novel, it was called A Scarlet Cord, and the cover designer sent me the cover, and it was absolutely stunningly beautiful. But it was a picture of an old stone church out in a field with poppies and some other flowers growing, wildflowers, and there was nothing like that scene in my novel. And I did not want to say, please go back to the drawing board, because I was afraid the next cover couldn't possibly be as beautiful as this. And that, I think, is the first time it hit me. Well, hey, I could add that scene into the book easily. And I did that. And I have had people say, wow, that artist just captured that so beautifully. I said, well, no, actually, I captured the artist with my writing, because the cover came first and that scene came afterwards.
You said you wanted to ask the question. What are you doing?
Yes, I guess I do. How do you ensure that your books are well researched and up to date?
Well, that is an interesting question.
Especially when you've been writing books for so long, you know,
Yeah.
like some of your earlier books, I'm
Yeah,
thinking, you know, it didn't have cell phones in it or didn't have
that's
computers in it. So how do you keep
That's
that
exactly-
all fresh?
Yes, and it's a challenge when you write contemporary, especially if you write anything technical at all. For a long time, writers were taking BlackBerries out of their novels and putting in iPhones. You know,
Right,
well,
right.
You know, in 5 years, it'll be something different than iPhones, probably. So we have kind of learned to not say he flipped open his phone. You just say he picked up his phone or whatever.
Right.
That will keep it a little. But yes, when I had the chance to rewrite About to Cherish, my very first novel, I thought that I was going to be going through to update the medical information. The novel was about a family dealing with Alzheimer's disease, and
Right.
over 20 years, so much has changed on the medical front. But instead, what I found was that I was shouting at my characters, "Call her on your cell phone, you dummy!" And I had him going to the library to do research rather than Googling things, you know, that type of thing. And those were fairly easy changes, but it really would have dated the novel to try to just put it out again the way it was written in 1994. So I'm glad I had the opportunity to update things.
Do
You know, in 10 years it'll be out of date again. So.
yeah, absolutely. Do any of your books reflect any of the historical events that have been going on? You know, like how some of that might have affected the setting of your books?
You know, I have a lot of authors have done this, but I have purposely tried to set my books, first of all, before the pandemic, because I don't want my characters to have to put a mask on every time they, you know, leave the house or not be able to leave the house. You know, I mean, the pandemic changed our world so much, and books that are going to be set after the pandemic are going to have to reflect that. They just are. It's like in some of my earlier books that were written before 9/11. I had characters going to the airport and taking their family right up to the gate.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
We don't do that anymore.
I remember doing that.
So those kinds of things have to change. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, the things going on in the world do change. But contemporary writers pretty much learn not to use too many, because by the time your book comes out, they will no longer be current. We'll be on to something else, you know.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost better to give a little bit of time, you know, with whatever's going on in the world. Don't write about it for maybe 10 years until everything shakes out and we see what it became, you know.
Right.
You know, Deb, you've written so many books, I mean, for quite a period of time. Do you find that your audience or the readers are different, or do you think there's a change in your audience or target audience?
Yes, I would say there is. I think and this is kind of strange, when I was young, my readers were older women, more like my age. And now that I'm older, my readers are younger. And I'm not sure how to explain that, other than, you know, it's not hard to be younger than me, I guess. I don't know. But I do think that, you know, I've always had a wide range of readers, and most of my readers are women, but I also have quite a few men that read my books. And I always say usually that's because their wife put my book in their hand and said, "You should read this. It's a good book," or maybe it has something that they want their husbands to hear, or whatever that is. But yes, I do think readers are changing, and I think I have changed my writing a little bit because of it. And one of the things is that today's readers don't have time for a lot of fluffy, poetic writing. They just want the story.
Right.
They want it told beautifully. They want it, you know, excellently written, but they don't want a lot of description, and they don't want to take forever to get to, you know, point A.
Right.
And so when I read my older writing, I definitely wrote a little bit more flowery when I first started out, and I write a lot more spare now and sparse.
Also, the other thing I was wondering is if you belong to any writing groups, and if is that any of that ever put any influences?
Yes. And if I were going to make a recommendation to a new writer, that is the first thing I would tell them is get involved in a writers group. There's a wonderful writers group that meets in Cape Girardeau near where I live.
Yes, the Writers Guild. As a matter of fact,
Yes.
the Writers Guild has got a meeting this Saturday, January 28th, 10:30 at the library. So if you're in town, do it.
Absolutely. And not only is it a great place to learn how to write, to hear from other authors what their experience has been, but it's a great place to meet maybe a writing critique partner or just a friend who gets you, because writers
Yeah.
are strange ducks sometimes.
They are.
And,
I'm married to
get
one,
each
and
other.
he is a strange duck.
yes, and my husband would say the same thing.
Right. He
Yeah,
quacks and quacks and
absolutely.
quacks.
Yeah.
Well, you know he's a duck then.
That's right. And for the Christian market that I write for, there is American Christian Fiction Writers. And like you said, Gael, I was on the board of that organization for many years. And it is a wonderful organization, a very large one. But there are chapters all over the country. And there's one that it just started up that meets in Festus, Missouri. It's the
Okay.
St. Louis chapter. And the annual conference, which has drawn everywhere from 300 to 700 people at a time, that is in St. Louis again this year. We were in St. Louis in September, and we'll be there again in August this year.
That's
And so
terrific. Do you know what the date is on that?
Yeah, I can tell you in just a minute. It's acfw.com. We'll have all the information you need to. It's registration hasn't opened yet, but it usually opens in May.
Okay.
And the conference this year is it's August 23rd through the 26th.
Okay. So
And
for all you
it's a
aspiring
fabulous conference.
all you aspiring writers, come on out and take a look at this conference. It sounds like it'd be a great
Yes.
experience.
I appreciate
It
your
is,
time,
and the
Deb.
wonderful thing, well, I have enjoyed it very much. Thank you. You guys have done a great job with questions too.
Well,
Well, between the two of us, some of us are thinking.
she has to slap me every once in a while.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah Rainey, for chatting with us.
Thank you.
It's been a delight. And let's see, we are listening to the Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price. And
We'll see you next week.
next week, we'll see you in the radio. Thank you and have a good evening.